Snow came down quiet on the old west town, soft as ash from a dying fire. It covered the streets, the roofs, the forgotten trails that once rang with wagon wheels and hope. Winter had a way of showing what the frontier truly was: cold, empty, honest. On Christmas Eve, the wind cut through the valley like a blade, and every soul still breathing felt its truth in the bones. Eli Harper stood in the doorway of his log house, one hand on the rough pine frame, the other resting near his belt out of habit more than need. He had not worn his gun in months. There was no one left to fight. Not since the fever took his wife and the silence took everything else. The lamp behind him cast a warm glow, spilling light onto the porch where frost clung like sorrow that would not let go. Inside, a small table was set, a meal prepared by neighbors who meant well but did not know how to stay. Laughter still echoed faintly from earlier, but now the house was quiet again. Just Eli and the ticking of time. Christmas had come, but it had not brought mercy. He was about to shut the door when he saw her. She stood at the edge of the porch light, barefoot in the snow, her dress torn at the hem and thin as a lie. A metal pot was clutched to her chest like a shield. Her hair hung loose, dark, and tangled by wind and hunger. She looked no older than a hard life would allow, yet her eyes carried something older than the hills. Fear, yes, but also resolve. "I ain't got nowhere to go, sir," she said, her voice low, nearly lost to the wind. I can cook." The words struck him harder than any bullet ever had. Eli did not answer right away. He took her in, the way a man learned to read weather on the plains. She was starving. That much was clear. Her lips were cracked, her hands red and shaking, but she stood straight, did not beg, did not step closer unless invited. "What's your name?" he asked at last. "Layla," she said, just that, no last name. No story offered. Behind her, the old west town lay half buried in snow. Empty storefronts, a closed church, the saloon dark for once. Frontier life had thinned here over the years, leaving behind only the stubborn and the broken. Eli had thought himself the last of the kind. "You got family?" he asked. She shook her head once. Not anymore. He knew that answer well. Somewhere beyond the ridge, a coyote cried. The sound drifted through the valley like a memory that refused to rest. Eli thought of the native woman who used to trade herbs near the creek, who spoke of spirits that walked the winter roads. She used to say the land remembered loss, and sometimes it sent souls to test the living. Eli stepped aside. She hesitated just a breath, then crossed the threshold. Warmth hit her like a wave. She nearly staggered. Eli caught her arm, steady but careful, as if she might shatter. Her skin was cold as river stone. He let go quick, not wanting to frighten her. The house smelled of pine and bread. A single stocking hung by the hearth, never filled. Layla's eyes lingered on it, then dropped to the floor. "I can make stew," she said softly, lifting the pot. "If you got anything left, there's food," Eli replied. "Plenty," she nodded, as if accepting a job, not charity. That mattered to him more than he cared to admit. As she moved to the stove, Eli watched her from the table. She worked with quiet skill, like someone who had cooked for many and eaten last. Her hands remembered things her heart tried to forget. The fire crackled. Outside, snow kept falling, sealing the world away. They ate in silence. The stew was simple, but it warmed more than the body. When Layla finally sat back, her shoulders eased for the first time. Color crept into her face. "You can sleep by the fire," Eli said. "Just for the night." Her eyes lifted, shining in the low light. "Thank you." That should have been the end of it. One cold night. One act of mercy on a forgotten trail. But the frontier never let things stay simple. A knock came at the door. Eli stiffened. No one knocked this late. Not in winter, not anymore. Layla froze, her hand tightening around the spoon. Another knock. Firmer this time. Eli rose, every instinct awake. He reached the door and opened it just enough to see the shape of a man wrapped in a blanket, snow crusted on his boots. Behind him, further back, stood a boy no older than 10, his dark hair braided in the old way of the Plains tribes. His eyes were sharp, watchful. "We don't mean trouble," the man said, "just shelter. The boy's feet are bleeding." Eli looked from the man to the child. Native blood was clear in the boy's face, so was fear, so was pride. Lila stepped forward before Eli could speak. "Please," she said. "It's Christmas." The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning and memory. Eli knew then that this night was no accident. The Wild West love story he had never believed in, the cowboy romance whispered about in old songs, the Western survival tales told by dying fires, they all seemed to gather in that moment. He opened the door wide. As they stepped inside, the wind surged once more, carrying with it the past and something else. A sense that the paths crossing here were not done crossing yet. Outside, the snow kept falling, burying the old West town deeper. Inside, four souls stood on the edge of something none of them could name. And somewhere beyond the frozen hills, consequences were already riding hard toward them. The fire burned higher once the door was shut, as if the house itself understood the weight of what had just crossed its threshold. The man lowered the blanket from his shoulders, revealing a face carved by weather and worry. His beard was streaked with gray, though his eyes were sharp and restless, like someone long used to watching horizons for trouble. The boy stayed close to him, bare feet red and raw, jaw set tight against pain he refused to show. Eli brought water and rags without asking questions. Frontier life taught a man when to speak and when to let silence do the work. He knelt before the boy, careful and steady, and wrapped the wounds while the child watched him with guarded curiosity. "What's your name?" Eli asked him quietly. "Runs with snow," the boy said after a pause. Eli nodded, accepting it without comment. "Names carry power out here. You did not take more than was offered." The man finally spoke again. "I'm Thomas Red. We were headed north. Storm caught us." Eli did not ask why they traveled together, a white man and a native child bound by more than chance. The answer would come when it was ready, or not at all. Layla moved about the room, bringing bread and pouring coffee with hands that no longer shook. Yet her eyes kept returning to the boy, lingering as though something in his presence stirred memories she kept buried. She had seen that look before in herself, the look of someone taught too young that the world did not owe mercy. They all sat near the fire. The wind pressed against the logs, testing their strength. Outside, the night deepened, and with it came the quiet dangers of the land. Wolves were known to drift close in winter. Men, too, sometimes worse than beasts? Eli leaned back, staring into the flames. He saw another winter years ago, when his house had been louder, warmer. A woman humming as she stirred a pot. A child's boots by the door that never got filled. The fever had come fast, riding in on a trader's cough, and left nothing but empty space behind. Since then, Eli had lived like a ghost among the living, tending his cattle, speaking only when needed, walking the same worn paths day after day. Layla watched him, though she doubted he noticed. She sensed the ache in him the way one sensed coming snow. She knew that kind of loneliness, the sort that settled in the chest and never quite left. Her own past was stitched together with loss. She had grown up on a homestead south of the river, the daughter of a trapper who believed the land could be tamed with enough grit. Her mother died bringing her into the world. Her father followed not long after, a bullet fired by men who wanted his claim. Layla had learned to cook, to clean, to survive by being useful. She drifted from place to place, trading work for shelter, always careful not to stay long enough to be wanted or despised. The old West town had been her last stop. She had thought perhaps she could vanish there. But winter had a way of flushing out those with nowhere to hide. Thomas Reed sat stiffly, eyes never fully resting. His mind stayed on the road, on the tracks they might have left behind. He had taken the boy from a burned camp weeks earlier, an act of conscience that now bound him to danger. Men were searching, men who did not care about right or wrong, only claims and control. He had seen the look in their eyes before. It followed him even here. Runs with snow warmed slowly, his gaze wandering to the rifle above the mantel, then to the door, then back to the fire. He understood more than the adults thought. He had learned early that survival meant watching everything. Outside, a horse snorted in the distance. Eli's head came up at once. Another sound followed. Hoofbeats, muffled by snow but unmistakable, slow, deliberate. No one spoke. The fire popped loudly, breaking the hush. Layla's heart thudded in her ears. Thomas's hand drifted toward the knife at his belt. The boy's shoulders tightened. The sound passed, circling wide, then faded. Whoever it was did not approach the house. Not yet. Eli stood and checked the window, peering through frost-clouded glass. He saw nothing but falling snow and dark shapes of trees. Still, unease settled deep in his gut. The frontier did not give warnings without reason. He returned to the fire. "You can all stay the night," he said. "Storm won't break till morning." Thomas nodded, relief flickering across his face before he masked it. "We won't trouble you longer than needed." Layla met Eli's eyes. Something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, yes, but also fear. She knew men talked. A widowed rancher taking in strangers, a woman with no name, a native child. In an Old West town, such things bred suspicion as easily as truth. As the night wore on, sleep came in fragments. The wind howled, the fire burned low. Eli lay awake, listening to every creak of the house. He thought of the land, harsh and beautiful, and the way it tested those who dared to care. Across the room, Leela stared at the ceiling, her fingers curled tight around the edge of her blanket. For the first time in years, she was not alone. The thought frightened her more than the cold ever had. Before dawn, far beyond the reach of the porch light, a figure paused on the ridge overlooking the ranch. A match flared briefly, then vanished. Somewhere in the dark, plans were forming. Inside the small log house, the fire breathed softly, unaware that the quiet shelter it offered would soon be tested by forces none of them were ready to face. Morning came slow and gray, as if the land itself hesitated to wake. Snow still fell, lighter now, drifting across the ranch in thin, restless sheets. Eli rose before the others, pulling on his coat and stepping outside. The cold bit hard, sharp enough to clear the mind. He scanned the yard, the fence line, the frozen ground beyond. Tracks lay half-buried near the tree line. Horse tracks, recent. His jaw tightened. Frontier life had taught him that danger rarely announced itself twice. When he returned inside, Layla was already awake, stirring the fire back to life. She looked up at him, reading his face the way a person who had lived on borrowed safety learned to do. "Someone was out there?" she said quietly. "Maybe," Eli replied. He did not lie, but he did not offer comfort either. Thomas and the boy woke soon after. Runs with Snow noticed Eli's boots first, dusted with fresh snow. His dark eyes narrowed. He said nothing, but his gaze drifted toward the window and lingered there. They ate sparingly. Words were few. The warmth of the night before felt thinner in daylight, stretched by what might be waiting beyond the door. Thomas finally spoke. "We should move on." Eli studied him. "Storm's not done. We can't stay," Thomas insisted. "Not if someone's tracking us." Layla's hand stilled on the table. She felt the weight of those words settle deep. She had been tracked before. She knew how quickly kindness could turn into blame when trouble followed. "You're welcome here," Eli said, though the words tasted heavier than he expected. He thought of his neighbors, of how quickly rumors traveled in an old West town hungry for distraction. A widower harboring strangers was one thing. Harboring danger was another. That night, as dusk crept back across the plains, Eli and Leela found themselves alone near the stove. Thomas had taken the boy outside to tend the horse, keeping watch. "You didn't have to let us stay," Lila said. "I know." She hesitated, then spoke again. "Why did you?" Eli stared into the flames. "Because once someone closed a door on me," she did not ask when. She did not need to. Their hands brushed as she reached for a kettle. The contact was brief, accidental, yet it sent a quiet shock through them both. Lila pulled back at once, fear flashing across her face. Not fear of him, but of what closeness invited. Loss, pain, the breaking of promises that never should have been made. Eli noticed. He always noticed things he wished he could ignore. Outside, Thomas spoke low to Runs with Snow, teaching him how to listen to the land. "Snow carries sound," he said. "You feel it more than hear it." The boy nodded, absorbing every word. He trusted Thomas, but trust did not erase the ache in his chest. He missed his people. He missed the songs, the stories, the sense of belonging stolen from him by fire and gunshot. He watched the ranch house with careful eyes. Warmth lived there. But warmth could be taken away. Later, hoofbeats came again. This time they stopped. A voice called out, smooth and false friendly. "Evenin'." Eli's hand found the rifle without thinking. 3 men stood beyond the fence, horses steaming in the cold. Their coats were fine, their smiles wrong. One of them wore a badge too clean to have earned. "We're looking for a man and a boy," the one with the badge said. "Word is they pass through this way." Silence stretched. Eli stepped forward. "A lot of folks pass through." The man's eyes slid past him, into the house, lingering on Layla. Something unreadable flickered there. "Mind if we warm ourselves?" "You do," Eli replied. The men exchanged glances. The badge-wearer smiled wider. "We'll be moving on then." They turned their horses, but not before the man added, "If you see anything." Neighborly to speak up. When they were gone, the house felt smaller. Thomas exhaled slowly. "They won't stop." "No," Eli said. "They won't." Fear settled in, thick and heavy. Layla sat on the edge of the bed, hugging herself. She thought of leaving, of slipping away before dawn and saving Eli the trouble she brought. She had done it before, always before it got worse. Eli found her there. "You're thinking of running." She did not deny it. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "I don't want to be the reason you lose what little peace you got left." He crouched in front of her. Peace left a long time ago. Their eyes met. The space between them felt fragile, like ice over deep water. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "Stay, hope. Neither do I," he said. Somewhere beyond the hills, the men planned their next move. Inside the house, 4 lives balanced on a thin edge between safety and ruin, love and loss. And no one yet knew which way the land would decide to tip them. Dawn broke clear and pale, the storm finally spent. The land lay still, as if holding its breath after a long trial. Smoke rose straight from the chimney, and the ranch stood quiet against the white earth, worn but unbroken. The men came at first light. They did not ride hard this time. They rode certain. Eli saw them from the yard and felt the calm settle in him, the kind that came only when a choice had already been made. He stepped back inside and closed the door gently. Layla stood near the table, her face pale but steady. Thomas had his coat on, the boy at his side. "It ends today," Thomas said. "Yes," Eli replied. "It does." They did not wait for the knock. Eli opened the door and stepped out, rifle in hand but lowered. The 3 men reined in close. The one with the badge spoke again, his voice stripped now of false kindness. "We know they're here." Eli did not move. "You know wrong?" The man's eyes hardened. "That boy belongs to someone else. He belongs to himself," Eli said. The wind stirred, carrying the words across the yard. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Runs with Snow stepped forward, out onto the porch, his small shoulders squared. "I choose where I stand," the boy said. Something shifted then. Not just in the men, but in the air itself. One of the riders glanced away. Another tightened his grip, uncertain. Thomas stepped beside the boy. "You'll not take him?" The badge-wearer laughed once, sharp and humorless. He reached for his gun. He never drew it. A shout rose from behind, from the ridge. Riders appeared, neighbors Eli had not seen in years. Men who had watched from a distance, waited too long, and now came because something in them remembered right from wrong. The old West town had not forgotten all its decency after all. Outnumbered, the men backed away. The badge meant nothing now. They turned their horses and rode hard, fear at their heels. Silence followed, deep and trembling. Eli lowered the rifle. His hands shook then, the weight of what could have been settling at last. Layla stepped to him, her hand finding his arm. This time, neither pulled away. Thomas let out a breath that seemed to empty years from his chest. He knelt in front of the boy. "You're safe," Runs with Snow nodded, eyes bright but dry. He had learned long ago how to carry tears without letting them fall. Days passed. The land softened under the sun. Snow melted from the fences and ran toward the creek, feeding new life beneath the frozen ground. Thomas stayed until he knew the trail was clear, then left with quiet thanks and a promise that would be kept. He took the road north again, but not alone. Others would help him now. The frontier still had allies if one looked hard enough. The boy remained. At first it was only for a while, then longer. Eli never said the word keep, but it lived in his actions. He showed the boy how to mend a fence, how to read the sky, how to sit still long enough to hear the land speak. In the evenings, runs with Snow shared stories taught to him by his people. The fire listened. So did Eli. Lila stayed too. She cooked, yes, but she did more than that. She brought warmth into corners of the house that had long gone cold. She spoke gently to the boy, teaching him letters by the hearth. She laughed sometimes, soft and surprised, as if the sound belonged to someone else. And she and Eli learned one another slowly, carefully, like two souls walking across thin ice. There were silences, but they no longer cut. There were fears, but they were spoken now, shared. One evening, as the sun dipped low and turned the plains gold, Eli took Lila's hand. "I don't know what tomorrow brings," he said. She squeezed his fingers. "Neither do I, but I know I don't want to face it alone." Her eyes filled, not with sorrow this time, but with something steadier. Hope, earned and cautious. "I'll stay," she said. "If you'll have me, I already do." Spring came early that year. Grass pushed through the thawed earth. Calves were born strong. The ranch breathed again. The old west town stirred too, a little less lonely than before. On a quiet morning, Eli stood on the porch, watching Lila and the boy work in the yard. The past still lived with him. It always would, but it no longer ruled him. The frontier had taken much. It had taken blood and tears and promises made too soon. But sometimes when the land decided you had paid enough, it gave something back. That evening, as the fire crackled and the wind sighed soft outside the walls, Eli felt peace settle in his bones. Not the kind that erased scars, but the kind that taught a man how to live with them. The forgotten trails were not so forgotten after all. They led here to warmth, to family, to love that had survived the worst and chosen to stay. And in the quiet glow of the hearth, the future waited, patient and kind.